I think, Norman, you should break the ice by telling us what you expect from this series, because it's not just this book, but these 10 books which are going to be published in the next 5 years.
I think Jorge has got off to an amazing start. It would be, for me, impossible to select sketches and to put a kind of compilation, a summary together, whether that is spanning decades or whether it's just 1 year. I'm far too close to it. I confess to a degree of embarrassment when I look at any page of a sketchbook. It's probably far too revealing, whether that's the draft of a letter or whether it's an attempt to convey an idea. It's too intimate. So I welcome the independent, impartial, academic, whatever the adjective, whatever the description is, anybody who has a degree of sympathy and undertakes, I think, the Herculean task of wading through these many pages. I think it's an extraordinary achievement.
Well, Jorge, it's more than 1,000 sketchbooks already, and perhaps 1,500 when you reach the end of it in 5 years' time. For you, it's an amazing challenge.
Yes, it has been an amazing task because this volume 0 has been the selection of the 1,200 sketchbooks. So when I was set to make this job, I was a little afraid that it was impossible to see all the pages. Well, it has been done, and now I am very, very, very glad to say that I am seeing the sketches more slowly. Yes, finding more sketches for making this now volume 1 that is almost ready. So I think that this is a honor for me to do the whole collection of the sketchbook of Norman Foster in the new following 5 years. Thank you very much, Norman.
Well, thank you. I'm truly grateful.
Of course, both of you remember that in 2009, we had an exhibition of drawings in Ivory Press, which showed some of the sketchbooks, but mostly was about separate drawings that have been kept with different criteria. And of course, this selection started in 1958. Now your selection, of course, starts in 1975, when Norman started using the sketchbooks. And I do hope that the drawings not contained in the sketchbooks will be somehow documented in a different way.
I think that's a very interesting idea. It's not something we've talked about, but if Jorge could bring himself to encompass that task, I think that would be quite revealing, because of course I was sketching nonstop before I started to use and carry around books.
I understand that what is going to be done in the next 5 years is a selection of the sketchbooks, but not a complete publication of the same. So have you got an idea of the amount of work to be done? When we finish these 10 volumes, or are we going to be faced with something like 5,000, 10,000 drawings? What is the size of it?
The volume 0 has more than 500 drawings. And now for the volume 1, I am thinking about to make a volume a little smaller, because I think that we could do any volume about 500 drawings. So it would make a collection of 10 plus 1 volume. So it was 5,000 drawings.
I see. So you're thinking of 5,000 drawings, but of course Norman has produced many more. So I imagine that if not in book form, but perhaps on a digital format, all of his drawings will be documented. For instance, Le Corbusier in the Garland edition is 32 volumes, 32,000 drawings. And well, I think, Norman, have you thought, what is the relationship between this project of yours and the Garland archives of Le Corbusier, Mies, Aalto, Kahn, Gropius?
I think that there is a fascination with sketching, drawing, which is universal. And I was recently going through, how can I say, not rubbish, but an accumulation of papers, and most of them pretty worthless. And mixed up in all of this kind of mess of paper, I came across a blue notebook. And that notebook, at the age of 18, was when I was called up for military service in the RAF. And as I opened the pages, there were these very neat diagrams about electronics, which was a course, electronics course, which prepared me for what I would be doing most of the 2 years in national service. And as I was flicking the pages, I came to the back, and the back is just full of sketches of automobiles, hydroplanes, boats, control columns. Obviously, this was my escape from the ritual of classes on, you know, currents, wattage, amperes, and so on.
I think it's amazing that you have also kept these drawings from as early age as 18 years old.
Well,
and,
it wasn't a conscious keeping. Obviously, it somehow not been thrown out. So yes, it is here.
I think that Jorge's challenge is, I think is very useful, because I have myself used these 32 volumes of drawings by Corbusier, and sometimes you are simply under the weight of so many that it is difficult to find the path. So to create a selection in which, as you said, with an academic perspective, the more significant of them are selected and offered, I think is a great difference between this project and those of the Garland archives that we have mentioned. Jorge, would you agree with that?
Of course. When I read about the 32 volumes of Le Corbusier archives, I thought, I cannot do that. Cannot do that. The difference, of course, is that the Le Corbusier archive are all kind of drawings, and here we are speaking only of the sketchbooks. I think the other kind of drawings should be selected and published and digitized, but I think that must be done by another people, more younger, much younger than me. So Yes, for the sketchbooks, I think the important thing is that I am trying to classify. There's a classification very easy, the projects, the works. But as Norman has just said, there are a lot of drawings that are as escape of the work of the profession. Are drawings in holidays, are menus in the table. So I'm in the same as volume 0. I am trying to do in the rest of volumes to show not only Norman Foster architect, but Norman Foster person with all the facets. And this is very interesting, even for me. So it's easy to select the drawings of the Foster House, the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank. And I think I am going to do a kind of miscellanea where we can put all kind of drawings that has no relationship with architecture or no direct relationship with architecture.
So it's going to be a personal and professional biography through drawings. You know that there was this Spanish philosopher and art critic, Eugenio d'Ors, who thought that drawing was the key that connected writing and the painting. And he thought that visual thinking could be expressed more economically by sketching. Norman, do you ever think of your sketches as visual thinking?
I think they're a form of thinking aloud in some cases. And I think it's also a shorthand. For example, I'm doing something with a friend next week, Ruthie Rogers, who created the River Cafe. And she's doing a series of podcasts. And she asked me to, next week, to have a conversation with her and to talk about a recipe of my choice. And I chose pesto. And I just wanted to remind pesto. So I wanted to remind myself making pesto, because I hadn't made pesto for a little while. So I did it with Elena in the kitchen. And Elena quite rightly said, you must make a note of this so that you remember it when you have this conversation with Ruthie. And I've got it here in the sketchbook. The most simple way for me was to draw the process. So it's faster for me to draw my version of a garlic rather than to write garlic. So it's casual to the point where probably only I would understand it. But I think anybody looking at it and seeing the word pesto written, it would immediately communicate. That for me enabled me to record it at the same speed that I was making the pesto.
Now this is, it reminds me very much of some of the sketches you make for your lectures, which are like storyboards, like the storyboards that the filmmakers draw to prepare the shooting of a film. So I can imagine this recipe for pesto as a kind of short movie.
Exactly.
Using your sketches.
So it's visual communication, isn't it, in the end?
Yeah. But not only communication, because by drawing, you also somehow crystallize your ideas. So you communicate it to others, but also you frame what in the end is the purpose of the design.
Yes, you're really translating the picture in your head onto a sheet of paper. I'm working with the United Nations on an action plan with another individual, an urbanist, architect by background in Glasgow, and he is framing this action plan. And the United Nations produces an extraordinary volume of printed matter. And in the conversation, I suggested that perhaps I could play a role of translating those words into visuals, some way that would aid the communication to, this came out of the Mayor's Forum, so this would be to civic authorities, to those who run cities. And we agreed that basically the power of the words coupled with an image would be far more powerful. And it reminded me of a conversation I had recently with a friend, David Jenkins, who was the editor over many years for the monographs on architectural works that I'd been involved with the practices. And he was making the same point that we reminisced about influences from our backgrounds, and the conversation centered on a particular period in the magazine, The Architectural Review, when there were individuals like Gordon Cullen and others of that period who would couple a photograph or an image or a sketch with words. And that combination of image and words was very, very powerful and has been, I think, a lasting influence.
No, absolutely. And I suppose that Jorge is also familiar with Gordon Cullen and the power of his drawings, who came to influence a whole generation.
Yes.
Jorge, in your case?
This is very important, the question, because as a translator, I like to say to my students that you don't need to know languages to understand a drawing. And that's very important for learning architecture. If you take a text by Palladio and you don't understand Italian, you don't understand anything. If you take a drawing by Palladio, you understand everything. So this is very important, as Norma has said, that visual communication allows a lot of people to understand things that in natural language is not possible. And I think it's very, very important because, for example, now we are thinking about if we put captions in the drawings of the volume 1. And I was thinking, these drawings speak by themselves. They don't need a caption. If I add a caption that said helicopter to a drawing that isn't helicopter, it's redundant. So I think that visual communication is very, very important.
Norman, you have shown some skepticism about the ability of freehand drawings to capture inspiration. You think it's more wisdom which is accumulated through knowledge and of course of the discipline and also of the problems of the site, the client, that somehow crystallizes in a form, but this perception of a sketch as an inspirational spark is perhaps overvalued. Would you agree?
Yes, I mean, I think that the idea that somehow you take a shower and then in one blinding microsecond, the whole kind of profundity of a concept is like a flash of lightning from outer space. I'm skeptical of that because I think that it's an accumulation. In other words, if you know anything about cross-country skiing and you see an international competition and you look at the television screen and there's this guy dancing up a hill, you know the amount of hard work, training, the thousands of hours, the sacrifices that that individual has had to make to, in the end, make it look so effortless. So it's like my analogy of the iceberg. You see only the tip. What you don't see is the long process. And it's interesting. I remember one competition and doing a sketch for a possible design direction, which was the design direction that we adopted. We won the competition. And then I remember thinking and conversing with the team and saying, you know, there must be other ideas that we need to explore. And I think we devoted about 3 months and we came back to the same concept. So that was like a kind of audit, I guess, because one was perhaps overly suspicious of the first idea. But in a way, there is something about the first edition of anything. If I think about automobiles, I mean, I have what is probably the birth of the Porsche as we know it. And it's called the 356, and it's from the very early 1950s, just the turn from the 40s to the 50s. It is so basic, it doesn't even have a fuel gauge. And it's really been put together from pieces, parts of the Volkswagen. But it is far and away the most beautiful car ever. I mean, despite all the development in the many decades since. So technically, the car has morphed into all kinds of very sophisticated variations. But there's a raw beauty about the first edition.
The first edition, or the first steps in architectural career. This is why I think your first
challenges
are so important. And in an artist, indeed.
Flattering, but
indeed, it's the magic of beginnings. But I think that besides this quality of the spark discovery of the first idea, in many of your drawings there is, as you say, a purpose to communicate it to others with the captions, so that besides talking to yourself, you're also talking to somebody else. And some of the drawings are transmit the idea of the project with such eloquence that one is bound to think that they are destined to communication.
Well, I think some are equally scruffy, but that's
yeah.
related perhaps to haste, impatience. So perhaps the sketch also communicates mood as well as the other qualities that we've talked about.
But in the case of Jorge is reluctant about using captions. But I could perhaps advise him to use as many caption drawings as possible. The ones that Norman captions himself and adds commentary, because he's, besides having a beautiful calligraphy and a very clear one, I think that I very much enjoy not only seeing the drawings, but also the commentaries he adds for his benefit or for the benefit of others.
Yes, some of the drawings don't need captions because the caption is inside the drawing.
Exactly.
And I would like to...
Go ahead.
Yes, I would like to say about this, the kind of spark divinity that as I knew the buildings already built, to see the process in the sketchbook has been very revealing for me. And I agree with Norman that when you arrive at a final solution, normally it's a process of tenths, twentieths, or even hundreds of drawings of trying to find the solution. And this is an idea that I think is it's easier to see in the sketchbook than in the books when are published in the monographs or in the magazines. And this is I am trying to show in the rest of the volumes, the process that has allowed to arrive to a final solution.
No, of course, processes are so important, and I imagine that the key buildings will be represented through the different sketches and provisional drafts. So I think this is going to be, for all of us, essential. But you have also added that you wanted to include things which were not architectural, but personal. To which extent can you do so? Because I think there is a problem of intimacy that Norman may feel ill at ease with things of the sketchbooks being published, and I suppose you'll be careful.
Yes, well, in the first selection for the volume 0, I have selected many drawings with a sense of humor, to say it slightly, and I thought that Norman must see these drawings before make the final selection. And I remember that he rejected one, and I was sometimes thinking, but what is the reason? Because I don't understand why to reject this drawing. I think it's a kind of joke. So we rejected it, but I am very happy that he accepted to publish some of another drawings that I was doubt about. For example, Humpty Dumpty with a great fall that I didn't understand initially what that means, but I think that this would offer the image of a person that when he's working is also enjoying life in general.
But of course, Norman, those sketchbooks are also a personal diary.
I know.
It's like the things that you write only for yourself to keep memories of what you have done, but not necessarily oriented from the beginning to be made public.
I know. I mean, some of the sketches you do, and I remember one kind of eureka moment on the Reichstag, and sketching something that somehow brought all the difficult elements, which were difficult separately, but somehow they came together. But I think for every one of those sketches, there's also the sketch which is an, oh my God, I mean, despair. You know, you look at something you've sketched and you think, how could I have done that? I mean, it's so ugly. And you know, you want to rip it out, throw it away, you turn the page and you move on. And then, you know, that might come back to haunt you through, through somebody else's selection. And at that point, you think, how precious is it? I mean, you know, it's just a moment in time. So in a way, I think sharing it has some value, I hope.
Undoubtedly. Jorge, I think that for you is also an important intellectual project. You have committed yourself to 5 years working on this. So it's the kind of culmination of an academic career. Can you explain why it is so important for you?
Well, maybe you know, well, Luis, you know, maybe Norman knows that I wrote my PhD thesis about architectural drawing but in 1985. So to make this selection, to write again about architectural drawing, has been for me an occasion to see my past life and my past academic life. And the prospect of the future of 5 years coming here to the archive to select drawings and see them published in books is for me like the paradise. 5 years of a wonderful job with wonderful people here in the archive in Ivory Press, of course. So I'm very happy. I can't do nothing else. I'm very happy to do this work in the 5 years.
I want to finish by, thank you, Jorge. I wanted to finish by discussing briefly the book, the initial book, and I imagine the following ones as physical objects, which of course is published by the Norman Foster Foundation, but it relies on the expertise of Ivory Press and Elena. And this I would like Norman to comment on the exquisite nature of the book as an object and how it links to Elena's long trajectory as an editor.
Well, Elena is celebrating this year 25 years of Ivory Press. Elena is many things. She's a perfectionist and an absolute in terms of quality, and just has an incredible eye. And the sketchbooks and many of the sketches in them would not have happened if it wasn't for Elena. So Elena is really the architect of this book, this series, Jorge's involvement, and I'm very privileged.
Indeed, she's the prime mover. So thank you, Norman. Thank you, Jorge.
Okay. Well,
thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much.